Ocarina of Time might be the game in the Zelda series I consider to have the best dungeons. In second place comes Twilight Princess. All of these dungeons are good or great in some ways, and we absolutely enjoy them. To make one thing clear, all of these dungeons are good. We're not ranking the lowest dungeons lowest because they suck. We really enjoy them as well. But that's how it is in these rankings. Something has to end up last. We're TheOwnersofTriforce, I'm on the one, and this is our Twilight Princess dungeon ranking. Of course, there's always a big chance that the first dungeon in the game ends up being last in our rankings. This has happened many times before, and that's usually because the first dungeon is very short, has easy puzzles, or maybe works out as a tutorial for the game, and all the rest of the dungeons are improved in various ways. However, the Forest Temple in Twilight Princess is something else, even though it's being ranked last. This dungeon actually has great length, and it can be a bit challenging. Since other things in the beginning of this game focuses on getting the story started, letting you learn how to control both as a human and a wolf, the Forest Temple doesn't have to teach you all that. It's simply just a dungeon like every other in the game. The theming is a lot more like the Forbidden Woods from Wind Waker rather than the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time. You walk around the insides of trees and it has a very natural feel to it. Some areas are outside in the open air, some are open for sunlight to shine through, and then there are others that are very dark and somewhat creepier. The dungeon actually has a pretty complex structure, since the bridge leading to the boss gets destroyed by Ook very early, and you need the help of the monkeys to get to the other side. Therefore you have to save some monkeys here and there, that will open new ways to other monkeys for you to save, before you can finally get across. The item you get is a Gale Boomerang, and the dungeon lets you use this one for solving a lot of puzzles, defeating enemies, the boss, and things like getting a treasure chest down. The enemies feel like they belong here. There are different Dekubabas, keys, Skulltulas, tile worms. Okay, the tiles are weird, but the worms fit into place. All in all, the Forest Temple is a very good first dungeon, and maybe even the best in the series. Just too bad there are so many other great dungeons in this game, because this one actually had the chance to make it somewhere else. Okay, the Lakebed Temple isn't this low because it's a water dungeon. This is actually my personal favorite water dungeon in the series. It may be confusing with the stairs and everything, and of course this had to be here because if there's one thing a water dungeon in a Zelda game needs to be, it's confusing. But I think it's easier, and I love the dark and creepy atmosphere, and the music really helps out. Water dungeons are often very annoying because you either have to do something as tedious as to raise or lower the water level, change the current, or maybe because the game has pretty annoying swimming mechanics. Here you have to go to each end of the dungeon and release water that will fill up the main room, making it possible for you to enter the boss's chamber. This is done in a pretty good way. The stairs make for some confusing puzzles as to where you're supposed to go, since every path is not wide open. This becomes easier after getting the claw shot though. The staircase allows the water to run through to other rooms, making huge gears and water wheels to start turning and allowing you to solve more puzzles and entering other areas. The swimming mechanics in this game feel great. I've never had any problems with it, and I actually enjoy a lot of it. This dungeon makes good use of different items as well. First of all, you wear the sword tunic, which is pretty cool looking. This allows you to breathe on the water, just like with the sword tunic in Ocarina of Time. You also have to use the iron boots to sink down to the bottom of the water. Then, of course, there's the claw shot. It's not really anything different from the hook shot. It can grab onto plants on the walls and other targets, break pots and grab rupees, grab stuff from the enemies, and the coolest thing, it can let you grab onto targets in the ceiling and make you raise and lower yourself with it. Mission Impossible style. I really enjoy this dungeon. We both do. But just like with the Forest Temple being the first dungeon that actually had a chance to make it higher, this is also the water dungeon that also had its chance to make it higher. But the dungeon competition in Twilight Princess is just too damn high. The Temple of Time. So we're finally gonna see the Temple of Time as a real dungeon. This is a pretty good one. You know from the beginning what you're supposed to do in order to get past the first door. One of the statues is missing, and so you have to go find it. It's not hard to get there, seeing as this dungeon is really linear. and most puzzles aren't really that hard. They're mostly about pressing or hitting a switch to open gates. However, the enemies are pretty strong here, and can set you on a test to see if you're really ready to face the Darknut. Once you defeat the Darknut and get the Dominion Rod, you're able to control the statue that you're supposed to bring back to the first room. By the way, have you ever noticed that the map of this room kinda looks like that clown helicopter thing Bowser uses in Super Mario World and Super Mario Bros. U? Anyway, when I say this dungeon is linear, I wasn't kidding. In fact, this dungeon is so linear that after you've reached the end where you found the statue, you have to go back the exact same way. But now that you're in control of this big statue wielding a hammer, you don't have to press switches to open up any gates, because now you can smash everything! It's so satisfying. If you ever had trouble getting through any of these gates, you can now just say, "F you gates!" and just smash them in. Since the statue can't go through doors, you have to lead him into these bells, or whatever they are. It's sort of a weird, but cool way to do it. One tricky thing is to get it over this scale, as you need many smaller statues to weigh up. Okay, this dungeon has decent puzzles, good enemies, and a very satisfying way to get back after finding the statue. But it is very linear and might end up being a really easy dungeon. This is a pretty cool dungeon since it's supposed to be the Temple of Time, but we don't feel that we got this holy type of Temple of Time as we were hoping for. I mean, it felt like holier in Ocarina of Time, and to be honest, the best part about this dungeon was just going through this portal. But that doesn't really count, does it? We have focused a lot on Gorons in this game. Darbus is one of the coolest characters, Gorebezo is one of the weirdest, Dongoro is a pretty good mini-boss, and we both have the Death Mountain theme on our top 15 themes lists. And Goron Mines might rank a bit low, but it's a very good dungeon. It's the second dungeon in the game, and it actually feels like a mine. There's lava everywhere, fiery enemies like Dodongos, torch slugs, fire keys, and fire toadpoly. But in addition to a lot of fire and lava, this place also has some areas with water. And did you know that the Iron Boots was used here to sink down to the bottom of the water, even before the Lakebed Temple? And what's even cooler and brand new to the series, the Iron Boots has another use other than help you gain weight. It actually helps you stick to these magnetic things, allowing you to walk on the walls or even upside down. This is really innovative, and it also allows you to use these cranes to transport you from platform to platform. The Iron Boots are also used in battles against Dongoro and Fyrus, so it's nice to see that multiple items are being used within the same dungeon. What we kinda think is weird is that you get the bow inside a fire dungeon. However, it's being used in many good ways. It's used to press switches you couldn't have reached otherwise, and it's pretty neat to use both the bow and the Iron Boots to hang upside down to shoot a switch. You have to go through many of the same rooms that you've already gone past, but all those switches that were hard to reach earlier can easily be shot with a bow instead, making it easier and quicker to get through. Plus, using bow in this area to shoot down the boulders is so much fun. You really get to try it out in action, and I always enjoy it. Another special thing they did about this dungeon is having the boss key to consist of 3 different fragments. Instead of having the key found in a chest, you have to find 3 Gorons located inside a dungeon to receive each fragment. It's awesome to really see all the characters and enemies inside the dungeon as well, and this helps it make the Goron Mines feel like a part of the Gorons' home. Goron Mines is a fun dungeon and very well done, especially to be the second one in the game. I can't say enough that the competition was hard, but seeing as this dungeon is pretty short and somewhat easier than other dungeons, we ended up making it our number 6. The City in the Sky is a very special dungeon. First of all, it's floating high above in the air, and you need to be shot out of a cannon to get there. That's already a pretty cool thing. But the whole design of the structures here feels so unusual for a Zelda game. The whole city is being kept in the air by propellers that are spinning at the bottom of it. This dungeon has quite a background, but we just strongly dislike that this is the city of the little Uka. I mean, what the f***? Well, it's always fun to just throw them down these holes though. Anyway, one of the special things in this dungeon is something that should have been mentioned in the boss ranking video. Early on you see Argorok, the dungeon's boss, fly over Link and Uku. That causes the Uka to panic. Argorok also appears once again and destroys a bridge, making it impossible for Link to get across for that moment. It's awesome to have the boss do something like that, because then you actually feel like something's really fighting against you. And on top of that, we always liked how you could look up to the top of the city while being outside, and you would see Argorok, who was pretty much always visible, just soaring high up in the air. Other things we like about this dungeon is that there's a lot of both indoor and outdoor areas within the whole city. There's a real feeling of being sky high above Hyrule when the wind is blowing, and that you have a fear of falling down. Many puzzles inside are about wind, where you can glide around with the Uka. Well, at least there's some use to them. And to avoid getting blown away, you have the use of the iron boots. In fact, you have to use many items inside here. Iron boots, bow and arrow, the spinner, the gale boomerang, and of course the claw shot. Speaking of which, you get a second claw shot in this game. How awesome is that? After getting the second one, a lot of the puzzles and the way to get around for the rest of the dungeon are by the use of the double claw shots. You'd think that would be pretty tedious to use all the time, but it's totally not. With 2 claw shots, you can use one of them to grab onto a target, hang onto the wall, and use the other one to grab onto a new target. The same also works when hanging down from the ceiling. It's so much fun! The dungeon is a very good one. It's a little complex, which is good. The music is also pretty good and atmospheric, just wish the Uka sounds weren't that annoying. You have to use the wall form for a bit at the end, and the dungeon even has its own shop at the beginning. That's unique to say the least, but this is a city after all. One last downside is that the enemy combat is pretty low here. There aren't that many enemies to fight, and the ones that you do aren't all impressive or fun to battle with. For our 4th place we go to the next to last dungeon in the game and the Twilight Realm, the Palace of Twilight. It's a pretty short dungeon, but my god what a place this is. Gets points because this is all we ever get to see of the Twilight Realm in the game. And it's such a special place. The clouds are all dark with some light shining through, and my god the music. This is truly a surreal place. The whole palace is just floating in the air, and it's got all these weird glowing symbols on them. Then, of course, there are the other Twilights. Midna quickly explains to Link that they're not your enemies, even though they look like shadow beasts. This is, of course, some sort of curse that has been laid upon the people by Zant. There are 3 buildings, where you have to go to both buildings on each side before entering the one in the middle. The objective is to bring 2 souls, 2 glowing balls with light energy, back to the platform in the middle. It seemed it would be too easy to just grab it from his hand, so of course one of the most fearsome and stressful moments in a Zelda game happens in this dungeon. The hand will fly and try to grab it back. On your way out, you have to solve puzzles by using the soul to clear out the black fog, and even make stairs and platforms appear. All of this while the hand is slowly moving closer, and these scary sounds will startle you. Some of the puzzles require Link to leave the soul for a short while to reach the door, to then use a claw shot. This may all sound very hard to do, but it's actually pretty easy. You can always shoot 3 arrows to stun it for a few seconds, and you can even make it get stuck behind the stairs at one point. When you get a soul out, you can move closer to the Twilight to let it rid the curse off of them, and they will appear normal again. You know, for a Twilight. They actually make a noise that sounds like Mr. Burns at that time when Homer and the rest of Springfield mistook him for being an alien.
Don't be afraid.
When both souls are brought to the middle, the Master Sword gains a golden light to help Link get rid of the black fog that would otherwise turn him into his wolf form. The rest of the dungeon is about climbing the last building, and there's a lot of platforming to get there. I will say though, that I love this porch, if I can call it that. This place is used in the cutscene before you face Zant, and I find it special because of that, but also because the view is so, again, surreal. The Palace of Twilight is pretty short, and a bit simple of a dungeon. But just the feeling of being in this type of world is amazing. We finally get to see some of Midna's homeland and some of her people. The enemies are very cool, and the atmosphere here is just brilliant. So brilliant that it's our number 4. To go through the very white areas of Snowpeak, only to find a friendly Yeti who invites Link down to his house that turns out to be the 5th dungeon in the game, was rather surprising. Snowpeak Ruins is a big mansion that has big parts of it torn apart, but also with some of the buildings still intact. The entrance already gives you a feeling of what you're going to see. There's a red carpet on the floor, there are several doors that lead into other rooms, both on the same floor and upstairs. There are lit candles and paintings on the walls, and even armor standing up on both sides of the way that leads from the entrance door. You also start out seeing a part of the floor that has been removed, and that there's a lot of ice underneath, and that one of the staircases has been destroyed, and even that there's a huge hole in the ceiling. What looked like a huge, beautiful and whole mansion from the outside quickly turned out to be a pretty ruined one, and that really shows throughout the dungeon. In one of the first rooms you'll meet Yeta, who tells you that you have to find the key to their bedroom where the mirror shard is being kept. It's pretty interesting that it's the bedroom key, and not the big key or boss key. Anyway, they locked it up after the mirror shard caused bad things to happen, like different monsters taking over bigger parts of it. She gives you the dungeon map, and marks where she thinks it might be, and tells you which door to go through first. In the next room you'll meet Yeto, who's making soup for Yeta and Link that'll recover hearts. After puzzling away with pushing blocks on ice to press down a switch, go outside to the cold weather and snow, you end up opening a chest where you'll find an Ordon pumpkin instead of the bedroom key. When you go back and tell her the key wasn't there, she'll think of some other place it might be, and while she does that, she tells you to give the pumpkin to Yeto to make the soup even better and replenish more hearts. Then she sends you off in another direction, where you find another ingredient, and you have to give it to Yeto while she thinks of another place it could be. Now, if she's tricking you to find their ingredients, or if she's actually having trouble remembering, I don't know, but luckily, the bedroom key is in the last chest, and that's when you get to enter the boss room, where she will turn into Blizzera and become the dungeon's boss. This dungeon is already interesting because of all I've said. You don't get to move freely around the dungeon at first, since you're given a direction, but this whole building is so interesting to go through. You enter rooms that has ice on the floors, rooms that don't even have floors, break your way through the floor, outdoor areas with white waffles in the snow, puzzles where you use cannons to break the ice, cannonballs that you have to bring into different rooms, use the wolf form to find chests buried underneath the snow, fight chillfoes and freezards that are very annoying to fight, but also really cool enemies, use the ball and chain to crush armors, ice, and even the benches inside this little church? There's even a small church inside this dungeon. And if you take a good look around, you'll see many paintings on the walls. Some are just of things you don't find in the game, but some are also something you'll recognize, like Queen Rutella, Ordon Goats, Temple of Time, Arbiter's Grounds, and other stuff. Pretty much everything I've said is what makes this dungeon so cool and fun to go through, and it more than deserves a third place on our list. On second place we have none other than the final dungeon in the game, Hyrule Castle. Just like with the Palace of Twilight, this one feels pretty short, but it's done incredibly well. After defeating Zant, Link and Midna goes after Ganondorf, who is currently hiding in Hyrule Castle. After visiting Zelda in the castle after Midna's desperate hour, Ganondorf puts up a barrier that doesn't allow Link or Midna in throughout the game. Until this moment. Midna wears the fused shadows and becomes this giant spider monster and destroys the barrier with force. As you enter, the rain starts falling, and there is no music playing. It feels eerie. The atmosphere is set pretty well, and the castle is just so beautiful looking. The courtyard is also pretty, and that's actually where you have to start. There are a lot of enemies outside the castle, like Bokoblins and Kargaroks. On one side you face King Boblin for the last time to get the key to the entrance to the castle itself. On the other side, there are towers and fences you have to destroy, and many Boblins to kill. One thing that becomes obvious on the map, but isn't all that easy to actually find, is a hidden area behind the castle. It's a creepy graveyard, where you can see the ghosts of dead soldiers when sensing as Wolflink. There is a riddle there that you have to solve to get a bonus key, allowing you to open up the treasure room at the top of the castle. But let's step inside. As soon as you're there, you start hearing a slow, eerie version of A Link to the Past's Hyrule Castle theme, but also put together with Ganon's theme, making it seem like, to us anyway, that something's gonna come for us any second. In this room there are multiple doors to go through, but we find it kind of weird that there's no sign of any staircase leading up. How do people get around in this castle without the claw shot? Well, there's this little thing, but it looks completed and not destroyed. So what is it supposed to reach? There's a lot of tough enemies to fight inside this place. A lot of Dynal foes, Dark Nuts, Aerial foes, multiple Dark Nuts. Enemy-wise, this dungeon is pretty challenging. And it does have a couple of interesting puzzles, like with the torches to make the platformers rise here, and find the correct switch behind these paintings to open the door. Then, of course, there's this one, where you have to use the senses to see the ghosts of the dead soldiers that will point out the correct direction to go, since any wrong step will cause the blocks to fall. That's a cool way to show the right way. There is a little cutscene that shows the resistance help out Link. While it is really nice to see more of what they can do, I got kinda disappointed at that point. I mean, I wanted to fight those enemies. Oh well. As you get higher in the castle, the music will get louder and sound stronger, and especially when you come to the stairs leading to the top. Just like in Ocarina of Time, you'll face a couple of enemies on each floor, and you will hear that you're getting closer to Ganondorf. But instead of walking up the stairs, most of them are now totally destroyed, and Link has to use items like the claw shots and the spinner to get further up. Then standing between you and the last doors is one last dark nut. Now, behind one of those doors is a treasure room in which you can stack up on bombs, arrows, rupees and a lot of other stuff before facing Ganondorf. That is, if you have the key found in the graveyard. The last steps leading to Ganondorf is a little walk outside in the stormy wind and lightning that really creates the perfect setting to face off with the evil villain. I have now tried to describe exactly why we love this dungeon. Pretty much everything I've said is a positive thing. It might be a bit short to be the last dungeon, but the atmosphere is incredible, the enemies are tough, the puzzles are good, and we especially enjoy that we, for once, got to see a Hyrule Castle that wasn't completely taken over by darkness as the final dungeon, like most other Hyrule Castles have been. What do you get when you mix some things from Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple, Spirit Temple, and Shadow Temple? You get our number one pick for best dungeon in the game, Arbiter's Grounds. It's got the desert setting from Spirit Temple, the creepy atmosphere and undead themes from Shadow Temple, and a fourth pose from the Forest Temple. I think that last concept was awesome in the Forest Temple, so I think it was cool to see it here too, especially since they're not the real mini-boss. There shouldn't really be any surprise if you've ever seen a couple of our videos that we picked this dungeon to be our number one. It's dark, it's creepy, it has countless undead enemies like the Stalfos, Stalkins, Pose, Red Knights, Bubbles, and a mini-boss and boss that are both skeletons as well. The music also helps creating a scary setting, and everything inside this place feels deadly in many ways. In addition to all these undead enemies, there's quicksand, these little scarab things, spikes, ghoul rats that you can't even see. Seriously, the first time I played this, I thought the game got bugged, since I just suddenly started moving so slowly, but stupid me just didn't think about the senses. The puzzles are really good, and it's nice to use the lantern again. There are some very cryptic puzzles, and especially this one, but hell, I found even that one to be an enjoyable puzzle. I think it fits having a horde of Stalkins rise from the ground if you do it wrong. It's also good that it's possible to refill the lantern oil inside the dungeon if you go empty. After facing Death's Sword, you get one of the most unique items in Zelda history, the spinner. This is a spinning gear that Link can stand on, that opens up many new ways for transportation and puzzles. With it, you can grind onto rails in the walls, jump in between them, use it as a gear to make something appear before you, and it has to be used through the whole battle against Stalfos. This is something that has never been seen in a Zelda game before or after. This whole place also has a great backstory. It served as a prison to keep criminals as they awaited trial, execution, or exile to the Twilight, just like Midna explained, and what it did to Ganondorf in a great cutscene after finishing the dungeon. The architecture and structure overall shows us that this really seemed to be a place of holding criminals, and maybe even tortured them, seeing how many different types of spikes and other stuff you can find here. Blade traps, rotating poles with spikes, spikes coming out of the ground. Arbiter's Grounds is a fantastic dungeon, and one that I always look forward to go through whenever I play this game. It has a great setting, amazing atmosphere, great themes, great enemies, a unique item, and it's overall fun to go through. To top it off, it has a cutscene afterwards that shows us the real villain, Ganondorf, and how the sages failed to execute him, and then you get to see that Sand has broken the mirror of Twilight, leading you to complete more dungeons. This is always a plus to me. We hope you've enjoyed our Twilight Princess videos, and remember to like and comment on them, and we'd love it if you subscribe, because for the next upcoming videos we're going to visit the world of the Ocean King in Phantom Hourglass. Thanks for watching, and see you then!